Hi everyone, and this is a brief summary of Chapter 7 from ABA-2nd edition, the Cooper book. My name is Hadiya Iskander. I'm a board-certified behavior analyst and a New York State-certified school psychologist. A major strength of ABA is its insistence on experimentation as its method of proof, which enables and demands an ongoing self-correcting search for effectiveness. And therefore, Chapter 7 introduces the basic concepts and strategies that underlie the analysis in ABA. The chapter speaks about experimental control, and it's achieved when a predictable change in behavior, which is a dependent variable, can be reliably produced by the systematic manipulation of some aspect of the person's environment, which is the independent variable. So basically, if you are able to predict a change in behavior based on a change in the environment, and you're able to do an experiment by manipulating the environment and seeing the change over and over again, then you have experimental control. How you get high degree of internal validity? And it's basically shown when experiments show that changes in behavior are a function of the independent variable and not the result of uncontrolled variables. So you have high degree of internal validity when your experiments show over and over again that basically the change in the environment results in change in the behavior or the behavior you're studying. So if you do that and there's a systematic manipulation and systematic results, then you do have a high degree of internal validity. What is a confounding variable? It's basically an uncontrolled variable known or suspected to exert an influence on the dependent variable. So if you are doing your experiment and you are trying to control a certain variable that you believe in the environment that you believe to be the independent variable, but then you see no changes in the behavior, which is a dependent variable. You may say there's some other reasons or variables that you're not aware of that are causing the behavior not to change or to change, but it's not what you had expected, or it's not really following your hypothesis. And if there's other variables that you're not aware of and they're not controlled and they are impacting the behavior at hand, then these are called confounding variables. The chapter then speaks about behavior, defining features and assumptions that guide analysis. How do we look at behavior when we do experimental designs? First of all, we believe that behavior is an individual phenomenon, which means that we really don't look at behavior within a group. We look at individual behaviors. It doesn't mean that we're not interested in group comparisons. We do look at groups to compare each person's behavior compared to the other person, but we really, at the end of the day, interested or have to look at each person's individual, even if we're trying to compare a group of individuals. We do have to analyze our data based on individual behaviors. We do look at them separately, and therefore we believe that behavior is an individual phenomenon. We can't say that a group of people behave, we say that an individual behaves. Number 2 is that behavior is a dynamic, continuous phenomenon. Behavior can change, and therefore we do have to continue to take data and continue to measure changes and analyze visually our data. We cannot stop at a certain point and say, oh, the behavior is static and that's what we have and it's never going to change again. Number 3 is that behavior is determined. It comes from determinism we spoke about in Chapter 1, and it basically means that we believe that everything in the in the universe has a reason. So behavior has a reason, and it doesn't happen out of the blue, and there's a reason for every behavior. There's a function for every behavior. Number 4 is that behavior variability is extrinsic to the organism. We do not say that this person changed and there's something going on within him that made his behavior change. We believe that behavior variability is due to environmental changes. So when the environment changed, the behavior changed, and that's why we get behavior variability. We don't blame it on the individual or his psychology or his state of mind or any of these terms. Components of experiments in ABA. So of course every experiment has its components. So in applied behavior analysis, our experiments designs have a participant or the subject. Could be more than one person, but again, we're interested in each person's behavior, and then we can compare the individuals we have to each other. Second is a behavior. We are interested in behavior in applied behavior analysis. We have a dependent variable, and it's usually behavior. Third is a setting where we do our experiments. Is in the classroom, at home, in the street, in the daycare. So setting is really important because it's really our environment. 4 is a system for measuring the behavior and ongoing visual analysis of the data. We spoke about this in chapter 6, and we do have to have a system of how we're going to measure our behavior. Are we going to look at duration, rates? Are we going to use discontinuous measurements? And we have to ongoingly analyze visually what we have collected. Number 5 is at least one treatment or intervention condition, which is an independent variable. We have to have some kind of treatment or intervention. If that's what we're studying when we do experimental designs, we do have to look at some kind of independent variable to see if it's actually going to impact the dependent variable, which is our behavior, or the behavior we're trying to study. Number 6 is the manipulations of the independent variable so that its effects on the dependent variable, if any, can be detected. And that's our experimental design. How are we going to manipulate the independent variable to get the changes or the effects on the dependent variable? This is very important that we have an experimental design, prepared to do our experiments. Okay, now the chapter talks about baseline logic, which it entails 3 elements, very important: prediction, verification, replication, and each of which depends on an overall experimental approach called steady-state strategy. What is steady-state strategy? It entails repeatedly exposing a subject to a given condition while trying to eliminate or control any extraneous influences on the behavior and obtaining a stable pattern of responding before introducing the next condition. So we're really interested in stability before going on to our next condition. Depends on the experimental design we're using. It's very important for us to have stable data before we go on and introduce our intervention or treatment. There are types of baseline data pattern. There's stable, descending or ascending, and variable. So baseline is basically the first condition we usually look at, and it's how the behavior looks like if there's no treatment and there's nothing introduced, and we have some control over our environment. So first, it could be stable. So if you have stable data during baseline, that means that that's a good sign for you to go to your next condition. Depends on the experimental design and the behavior you're looking at. You decide when to go to the next condition, or when it's enough data has been collected before you go on to the next one. However, it's very important for the data to be stable before going into the next condition. The second one, baseline data could be descending or ascending, which means you see a trend. Behavior could be going up or going down. And that means basically that there's some extraneous variable or something happening that's causing the behavior to change by going up or going down. And in this situation, you're not ready to go to your next condition, which is a treatment, because your baseline shows that something is already going on and it's not controlled for. and it's not a good time for you to go to your next condition by introducing your treatment, because there's something already going on that's impacting the dependent variable, which is the behavior. The third one is variable. Baseline data could be variable, which also means that the behavior could be going up and down, up and down. There's no trend. It's not really going up, continuously, or going down continuously. It's really going up and down, and there's a high variability, which could also mean that something in the environment keeps happening, and that's why the behavior increases at some points in time, and then this same thing disappears, and then the behavior goes down. And if you do have a variable baseline data, that means you're not ready to go to your next condition, which is a treatment, because there's some uncontrolled variable going on that needs to be controlled for your experimental design or experiment to make sense. So we spoke about baseline logic, and the elements is prediction, verification, and replication. So prediction is basically the anticipated outcome of presently unknown or future measurement. So if you have some data and you see them going in a certain way based on your treatment or your ability to control the independent variable, which is some aspect of the environment, you can predict that this data will continue on the same trend if you continue to provide the treatment, or it's going to go on a different route if you stop your treatment. So that's your prediction when it comes to experimental designs, if you're controlling for the right variable and there's an elimination of the extraneous variable. In prediction, there's something called the affirmation of the consequent, and it's when an experimenter introduces an independent variable on a stable baseline. An explicit assumption has been made. If the independent variable were not applied, the behavior, as indicated by the baseline data path, would not change. The experimental is also predicting that the independent variable will result in a change in the behavior. So basically, if there is if the independent variable were not applied, the behavior would not change. But if it is applied, the behavior would change, and that's affirmation of the consequent. And the logical reasoning behind it is that if A is true, then B is true. B is found to be true, therefore A is true. The second element of baseline logic is verification, and it can be accomplished by demonstrating that the prior level of baseline responding would have remained unchanged had the independent variable not been introduced. So if you're going on baseline and you have stable data, and then you start your treatment and you do see change in the behavior based on your manipulation to the independent variable, and then you go back to baseline and you see a reverse in the behavior, then you could say that you are able to verify your hypothesis, because the baseline responding would have remained unchanged had the independent variable not been introduced. The third element in baseline logic is replication, and it basically means repeating independent variable manipulations conducted previously in the study and obtaining similar outcomes. So if you keep going back to your treatment condition and you see the same results as before, then you have, as we said before, your internal validity is high, and the baseline logic element 3, which is replication, is present, and therefore your experiment design has worked, or you had the ability to control for what you need to control for in the environment to see changes in the behavior. So this is just a very brief summary of Chapter 7. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in getting notifications on the next chapters, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you so much, and bye.